Shalom Aleichem, learning a Sicha of Vayelech Beis. And it's quite a fascinating Sicha. I want to focus specifically on the last Ois Yud Aleph, from the Hirois. The Hirois Menegel Lepoil, from the Pirish Rashi. What's the Hirois Menegel Lepoil? So just to understand, often people ask questions. Did Chabad change over generations? Did anything change? Should have it changed? Is it the same thing? And I've heard the Rebbe saying something very, very powerful. He says, when we demand in our time that everyone must give up time for spreading Torah in Yiddishkeit, and specifically the Aseres HaMivtzoyim, and to do that all with durchgenommen, penetrated, permeated with your Futza Meinasecha Chutza, there are people who think or claim that Amalek Derz is Nikeven Azan Haga. In previous generations, we didn't cough so much in Avos Yisrael. And because until the last years when the Rebbe, the Shver, came to America, there was no such Anhaga. Vikumta says, now let me give you some historical context. Till the late 1700s, 1800s, there was very rarely the idea of a Yid frying out. There was the Indian of forced conversions or even voluntary conversions. But the Yid of just totally assimilating out of Yiddishkeit was a relatively modern thing, and it happened en masse very quickly. After the French Revolution and ideas of Westernism and the fact that Jews were allowed to start going to universities, etc. The early 1800s saw a massive assimilation, and you see that Tzemach Tzedek and the other Rabbeim fighting Haskalah. Remember, till then they were fighting the Tsar, they were fighting the Cantonist decree, which was really run by the Goyim. But now, for the first time in time at Tzemach Tzedek, you see them fighting Haskalah. But it was much more a fight. It wasn't the idea of going and being mekad of them. So, fight. And in the Rebbe Rashab's time, you see him fighting the Zionists. And the Zionists of then, and the assimilation and the secularism. So, even in the Rabbeim, yes, we know that the Alter Rebbe was known as a Machzir B'tshuva. In other words, he made lots of Baal Tshuva. But as a movement, as a style, going and literally sitting with the masculine and trying to bring them back to Yiddishkeit, no. And the communists, we could talk about it when the Frierdiker Rebbe was fighting the communists in Russia, the Yevsektia, which were all Jews destroying Judaism. They weren't interested in talking. It was fighting them. It was tooth and nail. It was mamish destruction. And even when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Poland, when in Poland there wasn't the communists at the time, and there were Frei Yidden, but you see the more the Frierdiker Rebbe was spreading the Yiddishkeit to the Fruma Olam over there in Varsha, in Avtzon. He's building yeshivas, but the idea of going and reaching out to Yidden that are far from the derech was very, very, as the Rebbe says, biz ongekommen in America. It only started when the Frierdiker Rebbe comes to America. America is nicht anders, and suddenly starts a revolution. In other words, shlichus is a very, if I could use words, it's a very American idea. It didn't really take off in the old country. So you're going to sit there saying, where's the Chabad of old? Avoid 6 hours davening. First of all, there's nothing wrong with that. But if them Empertman, on this we answer, Dabad echad lador v'leishnei dabar lador. What did the Rebbe say? Dabad is manhig. Vayadber. There's one leader, there's one policy maker, there's one standard. As Kentake Zain, as if you could do this, he doesn't say that they were wrong. He doesn't say that the previous generations were wrong for not doing Avodas Hashlichus. He's not saying that. He says, could be that that's not what Avodah was. Oh, but in unser Dor, but in our generation, and like Chazal say, that means when we came to Bavel, he found the valley. In other words, he found a trench and he put up a fence. In other words, they looked and they established new takanas within Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe says, Valderek Zel Bavel Bisman, which is very interesting. The Bavel is not only a location, it's a Bavel in time. Bavel in space is Golus. And Bavel in time is also Golus. In other words, it's a different Golus now. Und der Rebbe der Nasi sagt, as in heintige Zeiten is a hechrich, it's a must. So Oisig sein Nafatas Amayanas Kutza. And Nachmer, Begeres HaKodesh, and for Semis of Baal Shem Tov, the famous, the Rebbe highlights, famous of the Baal Shem Tov. In other words, what I'm reading in the fact that he's highlighting that's the Baal Shem Tov, he's saying that as much as it's a new thing of our time, the Baal Shem Tov, the Miyasid Chassidus, the founder of Chassidus, already said it, as in Demis Talibiyas HaMashiach. But obviously the Rebbe is reinterpreting it, that's not only to the other Filmei Yidden, but it's to every Yid. Darf man sich finden Leuten derech von der Dabar manhig von dem der. Which is very interesting because there's a lot of Yidden, not another pashte, every single Yid with every single path has their own flow, and the Rebbe very much legitimized multiple derechs in Yiddishkeit. But there's a lot of drachim that follow a nasi that lived, a leader that lived 100 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago. And yes, you could take a lot of guidance from there, but ultimately the anhaga of the generation follows the doyet. And I have to say something again, it's my own private interpretation, take it or leave it. People often ask, for 7 years after Gimel Tammuz, how long does a generation last? But often the way we understand is a generation is father, grandfather, son, so each one's a generation. But maybe a generation is an avodah. But each generation has its avodah. The Rebbe Madash's generation was very short. The Rebbe Madash was a Rebbe for 16 years, 17 years. So to the Mittel Rebbe was a Rebbe for 14, 15 years. And in that generation, there's incredible avodah versus the Tzemach Tzedek for many years. And the Rebbe, Baruch Hashem, 70 years plus. We can't see the Rebbe. We don't hear the Rebbe saying anything new, although most of the stuff is new to us. But who said a generation is a time span and a human span? It's an avodah span. And the avodah of Darashvi is lahori des hashchina lamata be'aretz. And the dabar of the doyed is the person who set the policy and the standard. And as long as that's the avodah, the Rebbe is the nasi. And the Rebbe says this is the last avodah. In other words, there is no other avodah that comes after this within Galus. The only avodah that is lahori des hashchina lamata be'aretz. As jeder was is in der Dor Avtzon in der avodah and durch them is kasi mal. In other words, we are the generation of bringing Mashiach. How long is the generation? The Levi was shorter. And please God, it finishes now. But ultimately, it's an avodah. And that avodah will take what it takes. But it's one single avodah. Nothing changes. Some people with their genius ideas, it's time to Dar Shli flop. Let's go back to Dar Shishi, Dar Chamishi, Dar Rishon, Chveis Nishvas, the Baal Shem Tov. Nonsense, narishkeit. You don't regress in avodah. If the Rebbe set the policy of what avodah of Der Ashvi is, that's the avodah. That's what we're here to do. We're here to learn this Ashkina Lamata Ba'aretz. It's taking long? Yeah, good question. We have to work harder. But it didn't change the avodah. It's not as if, okay, we flopped. Let's, divert. Let's recalculating the whole idea of Chabad and Avtzon Chutz of bringing Mashiach. Not happening. No, it's not taking too long. It's not annoying. The Rebbe himself was extremely frustrated with that. But the avodah stays the same. The fact that Hashem decided it's not enough, I don't know why. But a doir is an avodah, and that's what the Sicha, I believe, is saying. That the Nasi Adar sets the policy, sets the approach of Yiddishkeit for that door. And each Nasi was for their time. Yiftach b'dayre kishmol b'dayre. Each person for their generation. Baruch Hashem. There's no Yiftachs. We have the Rebbe. It's not a Yiftach. Though the expression shmol b'dayre, Yiftach b'dayre is the Yiftach was a low life. He ended up, according to the Medrash, either killing his own daughter or locking her up. He was a thug, whatever. Again, but what's the message? Each generation with its Nasi. How much more so when you have a Nasi like the Rebbe? Allah is kama b'kama. So what we could take, we just started a new year, Rosh Hashanah Tavshin 9 days, Pei Beis, Tavshin Pei Beis, Teish Nas, Plo'is, Bakoil, whichever gematria you want. Let's remember that we are in the generation of the Rebbe. And you want to know what the Rebbe says? Look here. 200 books, 200 Sfarim, endless audio and video, and letters. The Rebbe tells us what the avodah of the generation is, and now it's our job to execute. If I may say, the first 40 years the Rebbe was setting the standard, and for the last 27, 20, 30, almost 30 years, we're implementing it. We're doing it with our own keiches, obviously with the Rebbe's brachas, but we're putting in the work. So maybe the generation split in two. I don't know. I'm just looking at, it's very easy to interpret in hindsight. I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. But the point is, this generation doesn't end until the avodah ends. And please God, may that be soon.